Okay, we'll get started. So welcome everyone to this webinar from Cambridge Centre for Evaluation and Monitoring, which is all about why international schools in South Asia choose CEM assessments. Before we get into the session, I just have a few housekeeping notes. So to ensure good sound quality, all members of the audience are muted. However, if you would like to ask a question, please do ask questions as we go along. You can use the question section located on the right-hand side of your screen. We will answer your questions at the end of the webinar, but please do post them throughout the session. You will receive a certificate of attendance sent to your email inbox after the webinar finishes, and you will receive a copy of the webinar recording via email next week. We'd love to hear where you're joining us from today, so please do feel free to use the question box to introduce yourself. So I'll just say a few words about Cambridge CEM, and then we can get into the session. So Cambridge CEM, which is the Centre for Evaluation and Monitoring, we've been working with schools for 40 years in over 100 countries. We're known for our evidence-based research approach to baseline and formative assessments, using extensive data sets to support future outcomes and development. We work with schools, ministries, and associations to transform the outcomes of the students they teach. In 2019, we became part of the University of Cambridge, which has supported our reach and abilities to support young people across the world. We help teachers turn data into knowledge, we bridge the gap between research and practice, and we provide evidence to support good decision making. So what will we be discussing today? So we'll be looking at age-appropriate assessments at Cambridge CEM and what options you have available to you. We'll look at some of the key features of Cambridge CEM assessments and how the baseline assessments work. We'll be looking at types of data generated by Cambridge CEM assessments, so looking at some of the reports that will be available to you. And we'll look at the major reasons why schools in South Asia choose Cambridge CEM assessments. So I'll now hand over to our presenter for today, Nitin Yadva.
Thank you, Cora. Very good afternoon, everybody who's joining us today for this webinar. My name is Nitin Yadav. I manage the CEM baseline assessments at Cambridge for the region of South Asia. I've been working with Cambridge for past almost 3 years now, and I've all throughout my career for past 15 years, I've been working in the education industry, but for different areas. I'm really happy that you have joined us today for this particular webinar, and I hope I'll be able to provide value add and positive about it. Let's crack on with our today's session. All right. Cora has already mentioned about the housekeeping rules. If you have any questions or comments, please keep them coming on the chat box, which you can see on your screen. We will have dedicated time at the end of this session where I'll be taking up all the questions that you may have. Great. So let's start off with our session for today. I thought it'd be very interesting to look at what are the different assessments that Cambridge provides. I mean, Cambridge is known for a lot of things. We're known for our research, for our university, of course. We are known for our examinations, we are known for our resources, materials, and we've been known for producing some well-known geniuses. I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about what are the different type of assessments that Cambridge caters to. Now, some of the assessments that you are aware of, the high-stake assessments like our IGCSE examination, which is a board examination, something that the children would appear at around when they are at around stage 10, and we also have our high-stake exams in the form of AAS levels. Some of the other assessments that Cambridge also caters to are checkpoint examinations. A checkpoint examination is an assessment that we would essentially do at the end of the academic year. It's like a terminal test, terminal assessment, which we'll do once we have completed a portion of studies, and we want to see how much the students have learned out of this academic year. We also have are assessments in the form of progression tests. Progression test is something like, when we finish a particular unit and we want to look at how the children are progressing with respect to the concepts that we are teaching in the class. We conduct this, maybe like half yearly or a quarterly basis to look at how the children are progressing. Again, and high-stake examinations. Some schools would have very similar, the non-Cambridge schools would have very similar approach, wherein they'll call it as a unit test or a terminal test. What we have at Cambridge is a checkpoint and a progression test, respectively. Now, there is an assessment called as the baseline assessment, which is not a high-stake assessment, which is something that we are here to talk about today. Something that is extremely helpful and resourceful for the teachers, such that it helps me identify the different type of learners that I am going to teach in the upcoming academic year. We are going to discuss about the baseline assessments, the one that you're looking at in this pie chart, which is blue in color. Now, there are different assessments, or rather, I should say, there are different names, that we have for the assessments for each age group. As you can clearly see from this particular slide on your screen, the assessments that we cater to at Cambridge CEM are right from the earliest, which is typically a child who is at age 3, and for the children who are 16 years and above. So these are all age-appropriate assessments, which is something that you'll be able to conduct at the beginning of the academic year. However, there are no specific rules that a school has to conduct this assessment at the beginning only. Now, across South Asia, the region that I manage, some of the schools conduct it at the beginning of the academic year, while some of the schools conduct it right in the middle of the academic year. There are also some of the schools who conduct the assessments at the end of the academic year. We'll discuss this in detail in the upcoming slides as well. What are the key features of the CEM assessments? First, these are all computer-based adaptive tests. Which means, no paper and pen. The teachers don't have a headache of building another test. I'm sure all of you would agree, the teachers would agree in this in this particular session that, we need to keep designing so many different type of tests, such that, we either make it challenging, we either make it easy, we make it a little mediocre. So no such kind of phases here. All of that is being taken care by CEM. Our team who work behind the scene are all academicians and statisticians like you guys. These people have been into the space of academics, have been teaching for at least a decade, and they are the ones who manage behind the scenes the question bank, the algorithms for this particular assessments, and all type of other supports. It gives you, there are no teacher markings here. The results are pretty quick, and these are very easy to administer. These are computer based, so all you need to have is a computer lab, and we can conduct it in batches, right? These assessments, that is the CEM assessments, are adaptive in nature, which means that no two students in the class will face the same set of questions, right? So what the assessment essentially does for the students is it will tailor the difficulty level of the assessment such that it is able to cater to each child's ability. For example, if as a student, if I'm appearing for this assessment, I keep answering correctly, these subsequent questions will become more and more difficult for me, right? If I'm a blessed child, I like to be challenged, I'll be provided enough stimulus such that I keep going and climbing the ladder to a different difficulty level than my current age, right? That's keeping me engaged. On the other hand, if I'm not that great with respect to a certain topic, then the assessment will keep on dropping the difficulty level such that again it tries to match my ability as a student, which means it gives a fair chance to all the different type of learners to demonstrate their abilities, right? So this assessment will have three major areas of assessments, which is vocabulary, mathematics, and logical reasoning, right? Now, these are the three areas. Basis research, not done by Cambridge alone. These areas have a very crucial role to play when it comes to the high stakes results, right? So they have a direct correlation between what the children achieve in the high stake exams, like your IGCSEs, AAS levels, or an IBTP, right? So that's how the adaptive nature of the assessment helps us as teachers understand what type of students am I going to be teaching for this particular academic year. The assessments are flexible. So as I mentioned, we can conduct this particular assessment when you feel or when you deem this as fit for your students. That is, I mean, you can conduct it at the beginning, in the middle of the academic year, or at the end of the academic year. Right. I'm sorry. Right. And as I mentioned, this particular assessments are skill-based. So I mentioned about the 3 areas that we are focusing on. These 3 areas being vocabulary, maths, and logical reasoning. Now, it also helps us understand. We'll discuss this in the upcoming slide. It will help you understand that what kind of forecast or what kind of grades can I expect from these particular children if they were to sit for a high stake examinations today, right? So we'll have a look at some of the reports, which will give you a better idea of how these reports work and how is it going to help you. I'm using a Cambridge pathway in this particular slide to help you understand where the assessment fits in the Cambridge pathway. So a baseline testing, which is CEM, that happens at the beginning of the academic year, wherein we would be assessing the students on their skills, right? We will understand what type of potential the student has to grasp the upcoming academics, right? So it focuses on skills rather than subjects. These are low stake examinations. So this is not meant to build any kind of pressure. This is something that helps the teachers identify the different learners and hence prepare, if not already, a pedagogy which suits each type of learners in my class. If I've identified my children in the class are much higher, they have a higher capacity to learn, I would probably want to make it more challenging for these students, because if I don't do that, then they might get bored, right? If I have identified on the other hand, there are students who are comparatively weak as per the other children in my class, I would want to drop the difficulty level such that I can help them climb the ladder a little slow, right? So I get to identify these children right at the beginning of the academic year, and then I build up the pedagogies, and at the end of the academic year, I will then have them assessed on our assessments like our checkpoints or a progression test, which are subject-based tests, and that will help me understand what kind of deep subject knowledge these children now have, right? How the changes or the tweaks that I made in the pedagogies have actually helped these children, right? Now, what type of data that gets generated in at the end of this particular assessment? Now, we'll have 4 different type of data that get generated. One being the baseline data, which will help you understand what are these trends and what are the weaknesses of the students, such that it allows you to focus, it allows you to benchmark, right? And it allows you to understand who are the students who are at the verge of maybe dropouts, who are the students who need more attention, and you can quickly assess them. You can quickly help these children right from the start of the academic year. You will have longitudinal data. Longitudinal data is something that will help, especially the senior management for the school, to do a lot of different type of analysis. Let's say if you're a group of school, you might want to look at how your school A and school B performs. What works in school A, what does not work in school B, what would you want to replicate, what would you want to get rid of, and what type of students are admitting in your school, what type of marketing strategies would you want to make as a school, and so on. The third type of data that gets generated is a predictive data. As I mentioned, there is a strong correlation between what the children score in a baseline assessment and a high stake assessments using data. Now, there are no fortune telling here. This is absolutely data driven. Using the data, we will help you understand what could these children possibly score if they were to sit for a high-stake examination today, such that you understand which are the subjects that needs attention and who are the students who will need attention. Lastly, to close the loop, we have value-added data, which will help you review the success, which will help you share best practices, which will help you identify what has worked, what has not worked. It will help you compare what was predicted and what have they actually scored in the high stakes exams. I have a small video which I would like to play. Just give me a moment. This video will tell you how exactly are we able to predict the data, or give you the forecast scores, despite not asking questions which are more subject based. Let's have a look at this particular video. So as you noticed in the video that we're using data primarily to help understand what are the likelihood of outcomes that we could expect from these children if they were to take the high stake examinations today. And at the end, it also mentioned that this is not something or this is not the only tool that you're going to be using. This particular data that gets generated at the end of the assessments is something that will help teachers, okay, to understand where the students are, to give you a starting point, to benchmark, to guard against complacency, and it is combined with your professional judgment. So there could be chances where you know something about the student, and it kind of matches with what Chem has told you, with what the reports that Chem has told you. It helps you allow to take decisions a little more confidently. It becomes more data-driven approach, and absolutely a combination of the teacher's experience and judgments for that particular class and the data that gets generated from Chem, right? Some of the reports which I thought would be interesting to share with all of you today. So one of the reports that you saw in that particular video, which spoke about the subject chances graph. I've taken this example from the subject of mathematics. As you can see, basis the score at Chem for this particular child. These are the percentage of chances. So a 19% chance of scoring a grade 8, a 14% chance of scoring a grade 6, and so on. So this is something that the school decides. Okay, firstly, this is not a data which is directly getting shared with the students or the parents. This is the data that gets generated, within the school login, and the school primarily will use this particular data for internal analysis, decision making, any changes that be required for that particular subject with respect to pedagogies, challenging or making it easy, keeping it at the same level, and such type of decisions. You decide whether you want to share this particular data with the students or not. That's completely your decision. We have a different report that gets generated in this case, which are for the parents and the carers, right? This helps you understand what is the what are the chances for that particular student for the primary years. Okay? For these children who are from grades 1 and grade 6. We don't have, again, scores which tells you that the child has scored 90 out of 100 or 50 out of 100, the child is too high or the child is too low. We rather have age equivalence scores there. We focus on the age equivalences, the capacity to learn for a particular student, and hence the data that gets generated for the primary year students will look something like this, right? I'll interpret this particular data for you. As you notice, the second column is nothing but the age of a child, which is years and months. So these are about 10 years, 9 months, 10 years, 11 months, 10 years, 5 months old children. And this I've extracted as an example from various topics on maths. So a student, one of the topics that gets assessed are additions, subtractions, multiplications, and divisions. Again, these assessments are adaptive in nature. So if a child has not been, so if you look at the third example, okay, wherein the child was not able to solve even the simplest questions under subtraction, because of this, because of the adaptive nature of the assessments, he was not asked questions related to multiplications, right? The reason being, there's no point asking in, more difficult questions when the child is already struggling with the previous part. you will notice what it helps me as a teacher understand is this is a child who needs attention. A part of addition, which is kind of there as expected. The other areas are definitely a struggle for this particular student. Similarly, there are other students who perform remarkably well. They are probably the blessed ones. They're operating at a level which is much higher as compared to the other students. Now, how does this data, play along with the data, along with the teacher's judgments? Out of these students, some of the teachers would already know that, yes, they would score more because they are actually paying more attention towards coaching classes. We do have a culture of coaching classes in a lot of cities, especially the metros. So they could be, some of the children who have scored really well, not because they have the ability to do that, but because they've already learned these concepts in advance because of the coaching classes. You know how it goes. Now, how it helps you understand is if majority of the children are at that level, you know that you'll have to maybe take it one level up, right? You'll have to up the level such that the students do not get bored, right? So this is a type of an age equivalence score. And then this is a value-added score that gets generated at the end of, when the children have appeared for their high-stake examinations. You will have a provision to upload the high-stakes exam scores, and it will create a dashboard for you, which will look something like this. Let's quickly interpret this before we move on to the next. We'll focus on the innermost slides only right now. The white ones, you can see, on the x-axis, there are the subjects. The innermost bars where you see the color is white are the subjects where actually children scored as expected, which also means that as a teacher, there was no positive value add, right? Students would have anyway scored this much given the current scheme of things. The green ones, the lighter or the darker green ones, are the subjects where the children actually scored more than predicted, right? Which means the tweaks that I made for that particular subject as a subject teacher really worked and allowed the children score even better than what was predicted. And if there are subjects where it turns towards red or lighter or the darker ones, would be the subjects where children have scored much lower than predicted, which means a negative value add. So a dashboard gets created, which will allow you to take a lot of decisions for the next academic year. What should you stick to and what you should get rid of. Moving on to the major reasons why a school goes ahead and invests their time into this particular assessment. So what are the different ways how a school would use or are using the assessments in the region? So one of the ways how the schools are using these days are as an admission test. It may sound a little different, but I see no reason why you shouldn't be using this. I know a lot of schools use this particular test as an admission test because it helps the school understand the type of intake, the type of profile that the students have who are taking admission in my school, right? There are certain schools who start with the new wings, right? They use this particular assessment to get a help in understanding the type of profile that the students have. What should be my starting point as a teacher, right? Am I getting the students who are, way above their age groups? Am I getting the students who are just there as expected, or am I getting more of students who are probably slow learners, or maybe students with special education needs as well? So it helps me as a school to, understand the profile intake, and next year, what would I want to focus on, right? Schools also use this as a retention test. What I mean by a retention test is this particular time, especially, a lot of regions have their schools, going on vacations. Students go on vacations. Once they're back from vacation, and it's generally a little longer, the summer vacation, a little longer is, at least in the West and in North regions as well. So how this particular assessment helps me, once the students are back from the vacations, right? When I put them through this particular assessment, it helps me understand how much of retention has happened, how much of concept learning has happened, how much the child actually remembers from what they have learned from the previous academia. Are they still at level of their age group, or they have actually progressed, right, from that age group? And it also helps me understand what type of positive value add was I able to provide as a teacher for this particular class, right? The other reason why a school uses this particular assessment are for the forecast grades. Multiple reasons why you could use this for a forecast grades. One, it will help you understand and identify the children who are at the verge of scoring the lowest for a particular subject. You can use this assessment to provide the boards, I mean, like a Cambridge or an IB board, with the forecast grades. There is a process where you have to provide these boards with the forecast grades, and this assessment becomes very handy for doing that. The other reason, this is a sub reason under this particular topic, is you could also help a child choose a particular subject, right? You could help a child choose a subject. A lot of times, I'm sure teachers would agree that there's there's a confusion or there's an argument at times with a student or also with the parents that maybe let's say the teacher feels that the child should actually let's say take up German, right? But the student feels, no, I want to do Spanish, right? Now, if you get a data, okay, wherein you get to understand that, yes, the child actually can score much better in this particular subject, which I am suggesting to the student as a teacher, right? My support is now backed with data, right? I can have better conversation with the student and the parents. It's obviously, I'm not coaxing the child here in order to choose a subject because of the XYZ reasons, but because the student will excel more in this particular subject if he were to take this, right? So these are some of the multiple reasons why the schools use this particular assessment that is, under the forecast grades. And these schools also use this for teacher evaluation. As we saw, the last report that I showed you in the previous slide, which was talking about a dashboard, which gave you a comparison of what was predicted and what have they actually secured, that is the students. It helps the schools, the school leaders, to take a lot of decisions as well. You could use it for teacher evaluation. The schools use this particular assessment to help identify the errors and get rid of it as soon as possible. It helps the school leaders to retain the best practices such that nothing is repeated for a particular subject. It also the schools also use it, the group schools especially also use it to compare this with school A and school B, right? So the top 4 reasons, and I spoke of some more reasons why a school actually goes ahead and invests their time into this particular assessment. One of the other areas where the schools also use this particular assessment in the very recent past, that is especially after the pandemic, was for the primary years especially, was the schools wanted to understand how much of homeschooling has happened, right? For the primary years, for the younger groups, especially between 5 to 7 years, between 4 to 7 years of age group, because once, after the pandemic, when the teachers started, with the physical classes, there were a lot of children who actually had an excessive homeschooling, and the parents used to come and talk to the teachers, mentioning the negative things, mentioning that my child actually knows more than what you're teaching in the class. So I believe your curriculum is maybe way behind as compared to what my child knows, which is actually not the case. I mean, it's just that the parents have been at home and they had a lot of time and they actually taught what was actually not required for that particular academic year. Now, in the same class, the teachers also faced children who had zero homeschooling, right? There were children, because they were at home, I mean, they absolutely had no schooling done. So even what was expected, they were way below that. So there were a lot of complications that the teachers had. And one of the reasons why the schools use this particular assessment in a very recent past and are still continuing to do so is how much of a homeschooling has happened for my younger age group in my school. They want to look at that such that they can then have a better starting point. They can have an understanding of what should be my starting point, and also helping have better conversation with the parents, right? I'm sure we all agree here. The parents are very much involved in what we do in the school. They want to know about each and every things that happen in the school for their particular wards, and this particular data, the different type of reports that gets generated at the end of the assessment, helps the teachers have better conversation with the parents. It also helps the teachers to let them know as to why is it that I'm putting your child for an extra, let's say, reading sessions throughout the week. And that will continue for 2 months. Why? Because I've identified that this is the area where the students struggle, right? So these type of better conversations is something that can happen you at the end of the assessment when the reports are generated, and one of the major reasons why the schools have been using this year and year into this particular region. With this, I am going to now show you a very simple case study that we have from one of our user schools based in Mumbai, that is Nahar International School. They've been using this particular assessment now for almost 3 years, and it has helped them understand not only the profile intake of the students that they get, but also what is the capacity to learn for the students. And they have implemented different strategies of how should we make the children score better in their high stake examinations. How should we make the students life a little easier, right, throughout the academic year, because now we know what type of students abilities are we looking at and what type of ability needs attention, right? That's the principle of the school, and that's what she has. This is what she has to say about the assessments. An ambassador for Cambridge, and has been associated with Cambridge since a long time. Wonderful. So this is what I had for all of you today. Thank you so much to all the attendees. I'm open for all the questions now. If you could please type in your queries on the chat box. There were certain queries which were also sent to us. We'll also take it up.
Great, thank you, Nisim, for your presentation. And yeah, as you say, we've got some time for questions. So if there's anything you'd like to ask about the presentation today or anything that wasn't covered, please do use the question box on the right hand of your screen. I'll just have a look and see if we've got any coming in. So we have a question here asking, do CEM assessments support preparation for CAIE exams? I know you touched on this a bit, Nitin, about how the assessments can be used for lots of curriculums, but I'll let you take that one.
Sure. So I wouldn't say that it directly helps you in preparing for the CIE, which is Cambridge Assessment International Education. I believe that's the question. How it helps you? I mean, since you would have noticed the kind of data that it gets generated at the end of the assessment, it gives you the forecast grades, the probability of scores that the child can achieve for each subject under Cambridge. Helps you prepare a child for a particular subject in order to appear for the Cambridge International Examinations, which can be in the form of IGCSEs or in the form of AAS levels. Not directly, but yes, indirectly, it does help you prepare for the high stake examination. That's the purpose of this particular assessment.
Great, thank you, Nitin. And we have a question here just asking about the suitability of the assessments for students with English as an additional language.
Sure. So it's a great question, firstly. In fact, this particular assessment are best fit for the children who are, who don't have English as their first language. So, for instance, our country, we don't have, not all of us at least have English as a first language. We all have different regional languages and dialects too. Now, how this particular assessment helps you or would be the best fit is the areas of assessments, right? For instance, if I look at an area of logical reasoning and mental arithmetics, these are the areas which are not vocabulary driven. These are the areas which allows a student with weaker vocabulary to demonstrate the ability that he or she possesses, right? The questions in these areas are going to be more like, more of calculations, right? The questions are going to be more of picture based, right? Wherein again, it doesn't require my vocabulary. I can look at the pictures and answer questions. The questions are going to be more logical based, so more of sequences, 3D objects, questions which are like symbol based, which again it doesn't require a lot of vocabulary. So it allows children from different dialects, from children who are not not from English speaking countries, to demonstrate the abilities that it has. And it helps us within vocabulary also, which are the areas where the child is struggling, right? That's the beauty of the assessment. Because not all the sections within vocabulary would be difficult for the student, right? We are learning English. So there could be certain areas where the child faces difficulties, and that's exactly what the assessment will help you identify, right? And also showcase that it's only the vocabulary piece that's stopping me from scoring more. You can look at my other areas where I've scored actually better than the other students. So this is perfect for the children who don't come in from English speaking. Hope that answers.
That's great. Thank you, Nitin. Yes, the attendee said thanks for answering that one. So we do have time for a few more questions, so please do post them in the question section if there's anything you'd like us to discuss. So we have a question here about discussions with parents. So I know you talked a little bit about this, Nitin, but this person is asking how parents usually react to the reports, or how the reports can be useful for guiding those conversations.
Sure. Thank you. I mean, that's again a very important question, I must say. So, how the parents react primarily. So, it starts from the messaging that the school gives for this particular assessment. As I keep mentioning, that these are not high-stake assessments. These are not meant to replace any of your ongoing scheme of things, any of your high-stake assessments that you have. Instead, this assessment will rather help you make your high-stake assessments, if you're using any external vendors, to make it more challenging or to make it more easier. Now, how do parents react is, now what we have come up with is, we understand that parents play a very important role, especially in India and South Asia, which is why we've developed new parental reports, which gives a good clarity to the parent as to what is it that was assessed, right? What is it that, what are the sample questions or the type of question that were assessed, and where is the child? It doesn't mean, or the scores doesn't mean to kind of demoralize a child, right? What these scores or what the scorecard will tell them is that the child is either working towards progress, the child is there as expected, or the child exceeds expectations, right? That's the only thing that the assessment says. And basis on this, these are the A, B, C activities or things or schemes that the teacher is going to put in place, such that at the end of the academic year, your child is progressed, right? So this is basically to help us identify the true picture of the student, because all the parents would feel that my child knows everything, right? And they always come up to the teacher saying that, no, you're being biased. This is a test that you have prepared, right? And it was meant to be difficult. My child was bound to fail in this particular test, right? Now, when you assess them into this particular for Chem, right, which is not designed by the teachers or not designed by Cambridge, it is designed by an external entity called as Center for Evaluation and Monitoring, and they have been doing this for past 4 decades, right? Now part of Cambridge University, of course. This is what the assessment tells you. This is what the assessment. This is what is the true picture of your child, basis which these are the ABC activities that I'm going to do to help you. So in fact, this helps us have a better conversation, or this has helped so far historically have better conversation with the parent, because this is not meant to promote or demote a student from class 1 to class 2, right? And that's the beauty. We help you can we help you, to provide, to pass on, the right information to the parents, such that it is not very, it doesn't look like it's very high stake examinations where the children, might fail or pass. It's not about passing. And So I hope I was able to answer it to some extent.
That's great, thank you, Nitin. And I think we have one last question here, which is asking about how head teachers or senior leaders can use the data. So if we're looking at the different classroom reports, how can they sort of talk to teachers and share best practice if you've got a class that's doing better than others, and can the assessments be used to help with that?
Sure, absolutely, yes. So this particular assessment, the type of reports that gets generated at the end of this particular assessment, it is for each and every level. The assessment generates a report at a student level, which is used by the class teacher, which helps her or him to understand who are the students at the verge of, let's say, scoring the lowest, and who are the students who are the blessed ones, can be prepared for high-stake exams like the English or Maths Olympiads, and who are the students who are there as expected, might score better with a slight push. Okay. The other level of report that gets generated are for the HODs, right? Which is the question. Now, for them, it will be for the entire grade. Okay. So let's say I'm an HOD. I want to look at grade 3. Where exactly are they? I've identified that most of the children are amazing in maths. Okay. And so are they in logical reasonings too. They're just there as expected in logical reasonings. But when I look at word decoding within vocabulary, let's say when I look at a subtopic within vocabulary, which is word decoding, that's where the children are struggling, right? So they're not able to probably understand well when they have to talk fluently in English. So as an HOD, I might want to discuss with a group of my teachers and maybe address this particular issue by involving more of reading sessions, identifying the ones who are really good. Okay, let them maybe come and address in one of the classes. Let them do a session on reading, such that peer learning happens, motivating the students who are comparatively weaker at this instant to come up and speak a little more, be a little more free, right? Give them a little freedom in the class to speak a little, to speak a little with no hesitations, right? And such that I can groom them in this particular area, which is let's say word decoding, which I just took off. So these kind of reports actually help us identify it, and then we can have these kind of group discussions with the teachers, and also we can have principals and the other school leaders who would want to look at the entire school's performance, not the grade performance, such that the principal can see these are the percentage of students who are probably a little weaker. Okay, and while majority of the population are at a level who can be challenged more, right? So maybe I'm going to involve these particular students identified as slow learners at this stage for some extra sessions on the topic that I've identified. So some of the ways, these are some of the ways how we could look at the data. Actually allows you to take decisions at each and every level. Right?
Thank you, Nitin. Some really helpful advice there. So I think that is, I'll just check. Yeah, we don't have, that's all of the questions answered. So just to say a huge thank you to Nitin for his time today and for his presentation. Really interesting to hear all about it. And thank you everyone for attending. I hope you found the session useful. If you found this webinar interesting and you'd like to have a deeper conversation about how Chem can support your school, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can find all of our contact details on our website, or you can email chem@cambridge.org. The recording of this session will be available next week, and your certificate of attendance will come shortly. So thank you once again to Nitin, and thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you again soon for another webinar.
Thank you, Cora. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.